Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com. In this video, I'm going to discuss a few more techniques which the press and academics use to deceive the public about climate. Here's a couple of recent news articles. Greenland's Petermann Glacier melts faster than expected. Study. And here's another one. Glacier in northwest Greenland suggests sea level rise is underestimated. Study finds seawater attacking glacier, flowing beneath Petermann Glacier with the tides. And carbon dioxide is not only attacking glaciers, but the press says it's also attacking black and poor people. The press wants the public to believe that carbon dioxide is a very evil gas. We've seen the propaganda. Now let's take a look at what's actually going on at the Petermann Glacier in Greenland. Over the last 10 years, the Petermann Glacier has expanded about 10 kilometers. This is where the ice edge was 10 years ago, and this is where it is now. The press says that the growing Petermann Glacier is melting faster than expected. There's a couple of interesting propaganda techniques in play here. The first thing is that they're saying the exact opposite of what's occurring, and then they use this phrase, faster than expected. Faster than who expected? In 1939, all of the glaciers in eastern Greenland were melting very rapidly. This is what Professor Hans Ullmann, who was considered the leading Arctic authority of the time, said. It may without exaggeration be said that the glaciers of Greenland, like those in Norway, face the possibility of a catastrophic collapse. But the Petermann Glacier is growing now. So it would appear that the glacier is melting much slower than was expected in 1939. Now let's look at the other piece of propaganda. Glacier in northwest Greenland suggests sea level rise is underestimated. But why do we need to estimate sea level rise? It's something we can measure directly. This is a NOAA graph from 4 years ago showing sea level rise at lower Manhattan. The graph showed that sea level rise was actually lower than all of the forecasts made by their climate experts. Actual sea level rise is below the extreme scenario, below the high scenario, below the intermediate high scenario, below the intermediate scenario, below the intermediate low scenario, and below their lowest scenario in blue. The article said that sea level rise is underestimated, when in fact the reality was that sea level rise has been greatly overestimated by academics. The models showed divergence in their different scenarios beginning about the year 2000. So let's take a look at what happens when academics fail with their predictions. Here is the current version of the same graph. Instead of admitting that they were wrong, academics pushed the divergence date out from the year 2000 out to the year 2020. They moved the goalposts. And 20 years from now, when these predictions fail, they'll simply push the goalposts out another 20 years. They will continue repeating the same scam for as long as they can get away with it. Now let's go back to a time when Greenland actually was melting, 1911. On May 5, 1912, the New York Times blamed the sinking of the Titanic on warm weather in the Arctic. They wrote, "An unprecedented warm winter in the entire Arctic is believed to be the cause of the vast number of icebergs adrift in the North Atlantic Ocean." They reported that during the summer of 1911, Greenland reached a temperature of 94 degrees Fahrenheit or 34 degrees Celsius. This is what that 94-degree location looked like during the summer of 1911. The summer of 1911 was extremely hot. July 4th, 1911 was the hottest on record in the United States. At least 3 states were over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. 30 states were over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and every single state was above 90 degrees Fahrenheit on July 4th, 1911. A July 1911 heat wave killed thousands of New Englanders and sent many over the brink of madness. In every major northeastern city, the sweltering heat drove people to suicide. During 11 hellish days, horses dropped in the street and babies didn't wake up from their naps. Boats in Providence Harbor oozed pitch and began to take on water. On July 4th, 1911, Boston reached 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is their all-time record temperature. The Boston Globe reported 112 degrees in Maine and 110 degrees in New Hampshire. Temperatures this hot are completely beyond the comprehension of modern Americans. And the heat was even worse in Europe. They had a 70-day heat wave which killed more than 40,000 people in France and more than 1,000 people in Germany. On November 29, 1911, Panama recorded world's record rainfall of 2.5 inches in 5 minutes. During 1911, China experienced the 8th deadliest flood on record, which killed as many as 100,000 people. The July heat wave in 1911 killed thousands of people in the United States, and there was a similar one in May which killed hundreds of people. On May 22, 1911, Maine and parts of Canada had temperatures over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And there was also an historic heat wave during the winter of 1911 in Texas. On February 2nd, they reached 93 degrees. The following winter brought unprecedented warmth to the entire Arctic. The historical record shows that 1911 was a very warm year, but Michael Mann's hockey stick shows it as one of the coldest years of the last millennium. In 1912, the sinking of the Titanic was blamed on a very warm winter in the Arctic, and it was reported that glaciers were melting all over the world. But Michael Mann shows 1912 as being one of the coldest years on record. Nothing about this graph appears to have any basis in reality. But the press, politicians, and academia cling to this obviously fraudulent graph because it helps them push their agenda. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on the climate scam for the past 15 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Toki, Upala, and the 4 new puppies on the web at realclimatescience.com.